Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. It's time for the Beatles on this date, so let us see what's been going on around the date of July 27, 2025. The first story is from the Beatles Bible, and it's dated Sunday, the 27th of July, 2008. Neil Aspinall left nearly £7 million in his will. The Beatles' finance expert, Neil Aspinall, left nearly £7 million to his family in his will. The father of five, who was 66 when he died, ran the group's business empire for 40 years, and he died from lung cancer March 2008 in New York. Originally from Liverpool, Aspinall became friends with Paul McCartney and George Harrison when they were at school together. He went on to earn £1 an hour as the Beatles' road manager, later becoming their personal assistant and one of the most trusted members of their inner circle. In 1968, he joined Apple Corps, the group's business empire. Aspinall became chief executive, safeguarding the Beatles' legacy after their split in 1970 and overseeing the anthology book, CDs, and television series. Probate records show that Aspinall left a net estate of £6,947,818. The fortune has been left in trust, with the income going to Susie, his wife of 40 years, for her lifetime. It will then be inherited by his children, Vincent, Rogue, Best, Gayla, Dara, Julian, and Mandy. The second story comes from the Beatles Bible. Tape copying, mixing, All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. This was on Monday, July 27, 1970. During the end of the July and the beginning of August 1970, George Harrison worked on overdub sessions for his third solo album, All Things Must Pass. During the recording sessions, a number of takes have been selected as best and were copied onto another tape reel. On Monday, 27th of July, they were transferred to another 8-track machine, which allowed reduction mixes to be made to create space for additional instruments and vocals. The last overdub session took place on September the 12th, and the final mixing sessions for All Things Must Pass was on October 17th. So there were two things that happened also on this date of July 27th, and they come from the website Today in Beatles History. In 1976, John Lennon finally had his request for permanent residency in the United States approved. And then in 1992, the Beatles' album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band hit number 6 in the UK. The last stories come from the Beatles Zone. July 27, 1963, the Beatles do photo shoot and a concert at the Odeon Cinema. During a UK tour, the Beatles played the last night of a 6-night run at the Odeon Cinema, Western Supermare. The Beatles spent the day with photographer Dezo Hoffman, who took photos and 8mm movies of the Beatles at their hotel, on the beach dressed in Victorian bathing suits, and go-karting. Next, on July 27, 1974, Band on the Run, #1 album in Britain. Wings started a 7-week run at #1 in the UK album chart with Band on the Run. Although sales were modest initially, its commercial performance was aided by 2 hit singles, Jet and Band on the Run, such that it became the top-selling studio album of 1974 in the UK and Australia, in addition to revitalizing McCartney's critical standing. And it remains McCartney's most successful album and his most celebrated of his post-Beatle works. The 27th of July, 2012, Tomorrow Never Knows compilation reaches the top 40. The Beatles returned to the top 40 of the Billboard Albums chart with the iTunes exclusive compilation Tomorrow Never Knows. The set included 14 classic songs by the band and marked the first time the Beatles released an album exclusively to iTunes that had never been previously issued. Next, on July 28, 1964, Beatles with 2 shows in Stockholm. On their second visit to Sweden, the Beatles played 2 shows at an ice hockey arena in Stockholm. During the first show, both Paul McCartney and John Lennon received mild electrical shocks from ungrounded microphones. Supporting acts included the Kays, the Moonlighters, and the Streplers. July 28th, 1968, Mad Day Out photography session. The Beatles hold their Mad Day Out, an all-day group photography session across London, which produces most of their well-known latter-day photographs, including the cover of Life in the inside gatefold of their Beatles 1967-1970 album. July 28, 1969, work on Abbey Road continues. The Beatles record Polythene Pam and She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. On July 28, 1987, Beatles sue Nike. The Beatles, along with Yoko Ono, sue Nike for using Revolution in TV commercials. Nike authorized the song through the group's U.S. label, Capitol, and Michael Jackson, who owns the publishing. Nike doesn't back down and continues running the ads, which anger many Beatle fans, but sell a lot of sneakers. The suit is later settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. July 29, 1965, Help, the UK premiere. The Beatles' second feature film, Help, had its UK premiere at the Pavilion in London. The Beatles later said the film was shot in a haze of marijuana, and 10,000 fans turned out for the premiere. July 30th, 1966, Yesterday and Today, #1 in the U.S. The Beatles started a 5-week run at #1 on the U.S. album chart with Yesterday and Today, the group's 8th #1 album. Issued only in the United States and Canada, the album is remembered primarily for the controversy surrounding its original cover image, the Butcher cover, which featured the band dressed in white smocks and covered with decapitated baby dolls and pieces of meat. July 30th, 1968, Apple Boutique, London closes. The Beatles closed their Apple Boutique in London after 7 months of business, giving away all the stock to passerbys and the Apple staff. July 31st, 1957, Ringo believed to have made Cavern debut. Richard Starkey, later known as Ringo Starr, is thought to have made his debut at the Cavern playing drums with the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group, and John Lennon made his first appearance at the club a week later with the Quarrymen Skiffle Group, and Paul McCartney made his first appearance January 1958 with the Quarrymen. August 1st, 1967, George and Patty fly to Los Angeles. They lease a house on Blue Jay Way. George visits with Ravi Shankar, where he gets sitar lessons. George visits San Francisco, where he wanders around Haight-Ashbury. August 1st, 1969, the Beatles record Because. It was released on their 1969 album, Abbey Road, immediately preceding the extended melody on the side 2 of the record. It features a prominent 3-part vocal harmony by Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. It was recorded 3 times to make 9 voices in all. Lennon said the song was inspired by Ludwig van Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I was lying on the sofa in our house listening to Yoko play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on the piano. Suddenly I said, "Can you play those chords backward?" And she did, and I wrote Because around them. The song sounds like Moonlight Sonata too. The lyrics are clear, no BS, no imagery, no obscure references. And George Martin noted that on Because, between us we also created a backing track with John playing riff on a guitar, me duplicating every note on an electronic harpsichord, and Paul playing bass. Each note between the guitar and the harpsichord had to be exactly together, and as if I'm not the world's greatest player in terms of timing, I would make more mistakes than John did. So we had Ringo playing a regular beat on a hi-hat to us through our headphones. Next, on August 1st, 1971, the concert for Bangladesh. It was organized by George Harrison to aid victims of famine and war in Bangladesh and took place at New York's Madison Square Garden, featuring Bob Dylan, Ringo Starr, Billy Preston, Eric Clapton, Ravi Shankar, members from Badfinger. Harrison had to shell out his own money to maintain the fund after legal problems froze all proceeds. The triple album, released the second in a row by Harrison, hit #1 in the UK and #2 in the US, and received the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. And the last story is August 1st, 1978. Danny Harrison is born. Danny Harrison is born to George Harrison and his soon-to-be wife Olivia. Danny, who like his dad becomes a musician, is the couple's only child. I will end the video here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so, it would help the channel to grow, as well as giving it a thumbs up. It's all a great help. And if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it lets you know when a video is posted. More importantly, I want to wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever, The Beatles on this date. Thank you.